We speak. Our words. We listen.
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 So welcome back to Autistic Radio, and welcome back to the conversation we're having with the behaviourist professions. We're talking with Dr-Suzi-Sapiets today. Susie wouldn't describe herself as a behaviourist, but she would say that her research brings her into contact with those in the behaviourist profession, and she also has personal experience of CBT that she talked about last time. What's been happening since the recording that you made with us, Susie? Have you had reactions from other people in your professions when they listen to you making the podcast?
Yeah, I had some very positive feedback from people who said that they were happy that I was engaging in the discussion and that the discussions were happening, really.
Yeah, it's that thing. Everyone says they're happy that the discussions are happening, but not everybody is willing to come and speak with us. So we really thank you for being one of those people today. Is there a reluctance for the people in the behaviourist communities and the research communities to come and speak to autistic people?
I think there's a lot of anxiety about engaging in these discussions. I think people are worried about saying something wrong or that things are going to be misunderstood, and maybe because everything's so polarizing online, I think people are worried because it isn't black and white.
Yeah, people are looking for black and white solutions to more complex concepts, I suppose.
Yeah. And there's been a lot of people from the behaviourist community that have had these knee-jerk reactions to people criticising ABA, and it's been quite defensive, and it hasn't really helped the discussions. Maybe defensiveness has stopped some people stopping and listening to what people are saying.
Yeah, I think, you see, so many people like yourself in this big conversation, the professions, they come here and they're almost apologizing. But when I look at it from the other side, I think there are real reasons to be defensive. The criticism online is so, as you say, polarized, so black and white, so difficult to deal with. It's as though autistic people have got themselves into a trench, and their criticism is not producing any tangible result. I feel we might be getting in our own way as autistic people here. Does that chime with you?
Maybe a little bit. The criticisms people have been sharing about behaviour analysis has definitely had an impact. People working in behavioural services have had to explain what they're doing when they're trying to seek funding from commissioners. It's definitely filtered through. Maybe we haven't been engaging with the people that we're criticising.
You know, I really feel we haven't been. I don't know why I'm including myself in the we, because I've just come to this fairly recently. I've only known I'm autistic for a short while, a few years. I think partly it is down to us. It was important that people called out some terrible things, and it still is important that people protest where things are obviously wrong in systems. But we don't have a channel of communication generally to the behaviourist group, and nobody's going to understand unless there's a communication, and it's really down to us now. Is that fair to say?
We always need to continue to call out what we think is wrong, but yeah, to engage with people and try to understand all the nuances.
Yeah. It's this vocal minority online that seem to cause the problem or give the excuse almost for the professional community to just point to it and say, look, would you want to deal with that? Would you want to deal with that amount of antagonism? And that actually then gives a complete reason to not engage with us. That seems unfortunate. We're saying, here is a platform to behaviourists, come and explain it, and we'll take part in it with you.
The attitude of no platforming and no answering to the calling out is not allowing the engaging, and it's only judicially fair that when you raise any concern about anything, you allow it to be answered.
Raymond's saying that maybe there's another world to discover, that the black and white binary idea can share. Not a new standard, but a shared space and a different frame of reference. Well, I would say to Raymond that I think that's what we have here. I don't think it's the only space out there, but it does seem that there's a rarity to having a real conversation with the behaviourist community. How do we encourage them in, Susie?
Just continue doing what you're already doing. Great conversations with different people. Once people listen, people should be knocking on your door to come and talk with you.
Through your research, what's the reaction to yourself as an autistic researcher? How does that pan out?
Most of the people I've engaged with have been very open to listening, learning from neurodivergent people. Often knowing that I'm autistic has maybe helped people want to listen and understand my experience.
We'll engage with the angle, both your angle and the concerned angles, and then we'll communicate.
They want me and other autistic people and people who are neurodivergent, people with learning disabilities, involve them. The people I've worked with have all been ethical and trying to understand and help people. I don't know if they're the minority. I know the understanding of neurodivergence is shifting. People are starting to understand more rather than what they might have been taught years ago, training based on that deficit medical model. Generally, people get into these sorts of professions because they want to help people, but maybe sometimes the targets that they've been told to work on have not always been appropriate.
My experience so far has been that a selected group of people who feel themselves to be working at the cutting edge of behaviourism have put themselves forward to come speak with us, and we've got a line of them coming. It always gives that sense that they are the unusual ones, that they are the progressive ones, that they are maybe the younger ones, and that they might be this small percentage of progressive thinkers.
I think that is fair, but also finding communication has always been a big thing within behaviour analysis. And then behaviour analysis is about how they teach a skill or maybe reduce the likelihood of behaviour that challenges, but not what they teach. That said, what they teach is informed by their understanding of a likely function of a specific behaviour. Quite often, they might teach someone an appropriate form of communication, for example, signing, to replace something that is causing them or other people harm. For example, hitting their head, if that's the only functional form of communication that they have at that time.
Yeah, there does seem to be an understanding in the people we've been speaking to that behaviorism has been a solution for the wrong problems, that changing people's outward behavior, obvious societal difference, has been the focus of using behaviorist principles to create training programs. That seems to be falling away now, and people seem to be trying to use behaviorism to help people find their own autonomy. What is your research telling you about autism and behaviorism?
Part of research that I've been involved in has been trying to improve practice in the UK. I was involved in the refined definition of positive behavioural support. It's just a definition, so it's not going to be the only thing that changes practice, but it is an important step to describe and explain to ensure that people are actually able to access good quality services that focus on things like their individual needs, their having values, their rights, as well as having access to evidence-based practices that can improve their lives.
So this is a written framework for PBS, is it?
It's a definition of everything that should be included within PBS.
Who uses that? Is it held up to account for anybody? What's the deal with this?
So it's written for people working in services and also for researchers to explain what elements should be there within PBS.
Does this definition contain anything that keeps these values and needs defined by the actual person and not able to be defined by the worker imposed onto them person? PBS has certainly needed a definition. When the term first came out, it didn't really have one. It was an umbrella term, and I remember it being hard to say what you thought of it because there wasn't any content to say what you thought of. That had led to some voices saying that it was being used as another name for their ABA concerns. Now that there is a definition happening, does it contain anything that keeps these values and needs defined only by the choice and consent of the person who is the subject of this and not able to be put onto them by the worker?
That's a really good question. And yeah, I would say it does. So a few autistic people were involved, and somebody with a learning disability was involved in contributing to this definition. A large amount on their rights, values, and understanding their individual needs, and how targets for any work with them should be set based with that person, based on what they want. It can be quite difficult understanding exactly what a person would want. They might have learning disability. They can often be excluded or not engaged within the definition. Try and seek their opinions, always including people who know them very well, and sort of working as a group to do something with the person that would actually benefit them and not be just based on what a professional or maybe a family member might want for that person that might not have a benefit to them.
Yeah, somebody else's opinion, somebody else's expectations of how somebody should be within society, a set of values imposed, yeah?
Yeah, this comes back again to the targets of behaviour analysis and how it shouldn't be done with a preconceived notion of what somebody wants. It should be based on what that person wants or the wider group of people they're working with, and based on assessments of their needs. Sometimes it doesn't work like that. So if people are supporting children in schools, they might be working on targets that the teacher has chosen for the whole class. So most children at school don't get to choose what they're taught. And I know from speaking with behaviour analysts that when they've been working with children, parents often request targets, and sometimes the behaviour analysts need to explain the things they want them to work on isn't always appropriate. Things like reducing stimming isn't appropriate unless, for example, it's leading to an injury, in which case then an appropriate alternative should be taught.
Well, I'm a survivor of school pressure to breakdown points, so I'm certainly highly aware of there's a red light to not have it's chosen by teachers what targets are where a kid might be powerless, say they don't feel able to live up to the targets, and the kids need more power than that over their own choices. UNHRC would support.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying. The topic of what is being taught at school rather than how a child should be interacting at school.
Have we solved the problem here? Because the problem was that behaviorism was a psychological science. Applied behavioral analysis was a program set on some of those principles, but it had ideas of changing people, molding them. And then PBS comes along, people are trying to define something different, but it gets molded or squashed into ABA, and autistic people say, well, PBS is just another version of ABA, don't touch it with a barge pole, we've been burnt by that before. And now you're saying the problem's been solved because PBS has been defined, and it's been defined in cooperation with a group of autistic people. Is that the summary?
I think that a definition alone isn't going to change everything that needs to be changed, and there's a lot of other work that needs to happen, but it is a good starting point. And I still think that maybe there might be cases where ABA could still help people. And I think, as you say, there should always be a focus on changing environments and other people's behaviour around the person. Within behavioural support, there will always be a focus on sort of teaching skills, things like helping the person communicate their needs, which in a sense is changing their behaviour. The key thing is recognising that the root of the problem is not the person, but it's the environment, the environment that the person is in. That's the
It's the whole
problem.
situation. It's the holistic situation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. If PBS has been defined to some extent, if it's been set out as this is what it is, and autistic people were part of that, did the process of defining PBS feel as though it fully included the autistic community to you?
While there were some autistic people involved, and there were a few of us that had quite a maybe good insider knowledge of maybe what the autistic community criticisms of behaviour science and ABA, PBS are. Again, it's only a small group that were involved, so that might not necessarily represent everyone. But as Maurice was saying, there was a lack of understanding about what PBS is, a lack of guidance as well. And so it is, you know, an important step to sort of have this definition and give sort of like a framework for people to understand what it is. But I think involving autistic people going forward in maybe, I don't know, work assessing the quality of services might be important in the future, and that we can continue to always engage with neurodivergent people and ensure that different people's perspectives are brought in.
I think you can see what I'm trying to get to the bottom of here, Susie, because it's lovely to hear that what you're saying is that there's been an input from more than one autistic person, an input from autistic people who are well informed, who are educated, who are in research. There's been an input from those people, but has that input come to a situation where the definition of PBS, if it's taken out to the wider community of autistic people, are we going to start again? Is it going to be shot down in flames, or have we got to somewhere that they will accept?
I would need to hear from other autistic people reading from reading that definition. But it is unfortunately quite a long document because there's so much that needed to be in there, lots of content. And so I'm not entirely sure how many autistic people maybe have read that.
No, I think
I
you're right. Very few were going to read that long document. So here's what organizations normally do. When they've got a huge, long, complicated piece of science or a piece of document, they have some kind of easy summary, some kind of bullet point way of dealing with things. And they do that and they create that to specifically engage with the community that they're dealing with. Is that something that's part of the definition of PBS as it is now?
not at the moment, although I there was work on developing sort of like a more plain English version of the definition, but it was a very big challenge and it ended up becoming very long in itself as well. And that was
I
even
feel
with
for you.
input from a speech and language therapist.
You're a researcher. You're thrashing out the detail of these things. You're working hard on it, and for you, probably every single word in this definition is crucial and important. But what I'm trying to get at is the communication out to the autistic community. If PBS professionals, if behaviourist professionals want to change the narrative, then surely this was a really big opportunity here. You know, we're defining something that the autistic people have been misdefining. The autistic people out there have been saying, this is just PBS wrapped up as a softer alternative. And now you've defined it. Now you've solved that. But it's not being communicated in an accessible way to autistic people.
Yeah, we do need more accessible ways of communicating it, that's for sure. Without losing the important detail.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's really difficult to do. I suppose what I'm trying to say here is if we're to achieve anything in a conversation between the behaviourist professionals, they need to come and find us where we are and communicate to us in language we can understand. And we're not all researchers, we're lay people. If they really feel that there is a misunderstanding between autistic people and the behaviourist community, come and explain it to us in simple words.
Yeah, and I think that is definitely really important because I've had some really I've had some conversations with many family carers who found PBS really helpful for their relative. And so we need to sort of improve understanding, not just for autistic people who maybe don't want or need behavioural support, but for those who would benefit from it.
You are damn right. Susie, you are damn right. I agree with everything you're saying there. I think it's wonderful that what you've done as a researcher and as an autistic researcher is you've engaged with this difficult group of people, these people that are controversial, and you have worked with them to define something so that we know where we are. And the next stage on from that is to reach out to autistic people. And if they're not doing it, let's you and me do it. Let's you, me, Raymond, Morris, the people of Autistic Radio, let's take this definition of PBS that you have worked on and created and put it out there in simpler terms. Let's you and me make that the thing that we do when we come and speak to each other. How about that?
Maybe.
Well, this is punk rock. This is if the man isn't doing it for you, if they're too slow, we can move quick. You've got all the knowledge, you've got all the brain, and we can take that and we can simplify that and talk about it here and define what PBS is in simple terms here on the radio.
It's definitely a good idea.
I think this is a bit of a joke here from Raymond. He's saying don't put it through AIE or a chat GPT to summarize it, because if you do that, that will be net dangerous. Yeah, I can imagine if we put AI onto something as important and see how it defined human beings as less than human.
Yeah, and there's definitely already lots of training in positive behavioural support for family carers of people with learning disabilities to help them understand and learn what PBS is. So that could also be another good starting point. But yeah, one family carer sort of described to me that before learning about PBS, they just didn't understand how their behaviour influenced their child's behaviour. But since having that sort of training and learning and understanding what PBS is, they were able to change how they supported their child to reduce the likelihood of them becoming distressed. So they did certain things like not multitasking when they were communicating with them and having sort of structured conversations with their child. And that had a really big impact on both them and their child, such as like less physical injury and stress for them both, and more access to the community, and even things like going on holiday that they couldn't do before. And so really, maybe what we should be doing is looking at those sort of training for family carers, because those would be aimed, lay people. So you don't need to have like a technical understanding of behavioural science or know the jargon that's sometimes used in academia and research.
Yeah, I think your value here could be that you can span the technical research and the jargon. You can bring us a conversation about what PBS is, how it's not just ABA rebranded. You can bring that to us because you've been working on that. And it'll be for other people at different parts of the profession to bring us stories about how they use practical examples. The problem for me at the moment is that all of the people that are coming to speak to us are confident because they have high level. They're a high level researcher, they're a professor, or they're a director of something. So it's the high level people that get the confidence to come and speak to us first. And it'll take a while for us to have people who are actually at the coalface to come and speak with us. But here's the opportunity. If anybody's listening now who's at the coalface, who knows somebody who is at the coalface, who can give us good positive examples about positive behaviour support, then please come to us.
Yeah, definitely. I've got another example of a research project that I was involved in that might, I don't know, be useful or interesting for people to listen to. So a while ago, I was working as a research assistant on a research project that was teaching children reading in school. And so as part of my role in that project, I sort of completed reading assessments with the children. And the key focus from the lead researchers was to focus on making the child comfortable and making the session enjoyable. So while we had like structured reading assessments to go through with them, we would take as many breaks as the children needed. We would stop the session if the child didn't appear comfortable. And we really focused on their interests and what they liked, so that the school would give some examples of things that they liked. I would go online and find videos or make up games, have backgrounds on my video while I was doing the reading assessments. That involved behaviour principles of what we know motivates children and what makes them feel comfortable. The reading programme had behavioural principles on teaching children to read.
I drawn a picture from the previous example with the carers, and it sounds like it could be apply the same to the reading teacher, and that the fact school is adapting to the child's comfort. Thank you for which. Does the definition of PBS then include the behaviour of the carers and the adults around the child, the other parties around the person who's the object, not only that person's own behaviour?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a really good thing for you to pick up on. I think I mentioned in the last podcast that there generally is a focus on changing the environment and changing other people's behaviour around the person, their family members, friends, staff supporting them, rather than changing the behaviour of the person. Although there generally will be some sort of element of teaching skills, in a sense, changing their behaviour, but ultimately the main focus is on making sure the environment is supportive and not causing the person to be distressed, either sensory or the way they're being communicated with. Yeah, there's a real drive on changing other people's behaviour, because so often the reason people end up displaying behaviour that challenges, things like self-injury or hurting other people, is because of other people's behaviour. So yeah, that's the main thing to change, other people.
Yeah, that was. I was just thinking adapt is a good word for what's happening. Just even's another.
Yeah, so helping other people learn the influence that they're having on someone else and how that can actually cause them to become distressed and be unhelpful to them. It's really important for people to understand, not just to understand the person's needs, but to understand how what they do influences what the other person does, rather than just seeing it all as on the person doing it, if that makes sense.
For me, to summarize it, we're moving from behaviorism being used as a one-way process to much more of a two-way process, that the behaviorist science is being used to understand and then react to the person in a way that was not envisaged immediately by the early instances of ABA. Yeah?
Yeah, I think maybe historically there was more focus on maybe changing the person, but they might have been thinking about the wider context around that person at the time. I'm not sure, because obviously I wasn't around back then.
No, you don't have to excuse yourself for the sins of the past. Yeah. we shouldn't take that's important for the profession as well. I mean, they come along being criticized for a lot of baggage that comes from actually the previous century, never mind the current decade. And yeah, we're aware of that. Raymond's asking, in this process, is it enabling a therapeutic agency? I don't know quite what he means by that. Can you interpret it for me?
Sorry, what do you mean by therapeutic agency or therapeutic understanding?
So within PBS, is it passing agency and responsibility to the family and the person so that they're involved in the process and they have maybe some form of control about maybe reducing how much drug they're taking in a slight way, or reducing the amount of certain exercise or whatever? Is there agency involved in this?
Yeah, definitely. So one of the components of PBS in the definition is partnership working and support for key people. The person that is being supported is ultimately the key person in determining what is happening in their lives. Given that people with learning disabilities often have communication challenges, that should also include people who know them really well. So often they're family members who generally are the ones who advocate, support and care for them to help sort of identify and clarify goals. Based on your explanation of what therapeutic agency is, I would say that is involved in the definition of PBS.
Thank you for that. I think agency is one of the things that's always important when we discuss the problems that autistic people have with considering behaviorism as a science and its applications. I think, Susie, that we have found a very important niche to speak about with our conversations with you, and that is to get this work that you've been doing, this complex version of what PBS is defined at the moment, and find a lay version of that to explain through the podcast next time we speak. Does that sound like a good project for us?
Yeah, I mean, I'd be happy to come and sort of try and give a summary of the definition.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
And definitely within there, you'll sort of see that teaching people to communicate key things and have agency and gain agency or more agency and control in their life, it is a really key part of what behavioural science is.
Right.
For sure.
Let's do it. Let's do it, Susie. Let's do their jobs for them. Let's communicate the version of PBS from the technical, from the theoretical, from the background that you have, and put it into some simple layman terms so that we as autistic people out there in the community have a bit more a handle, and the lie that PBS is just ABA wrapped up in a different name can be exposed. How about that?
I think it's a good idea.
Look forward to it.
I think it will definitely be challenging to get everything across, but we can definitely focus on key parts and try to explain the key elements within there and discuss those.
I'm going to leave Raymond with the last words. In text, he says, that helps. A conversation, exclamation mark, and a relation to the subject. Thank you. We'll be back. We'll be back with Autism, ABA, PBS, the big conversation, when we next speak with Dr-Suzi-Sapiets, a PhD researcher who is also autistic. Thank you very much, everyone, today for taking part in the conversation.
Thank
Wonderful
you.
chat, says Raymond. Yeah, thank you.
Autistic radio is personal and it's informal. which means that those taking part speak only for themselves. If they mention an organisation that they work for or they're a member of, they're not speaking on behalf of that organisation. We shouldn't take any implication from that. It's also the case that people's opinions change over time. So while this recording is there forever, people change.